This
All
meeting
right.
is being
Yes.
recorded.
Here we go. Hi, everybody. My name's Amanda. I am hosting our event this evening. This is our first meetup for our brand new code co-op group. We are sponsored by the company that I work for, Actualize Coding Bootcamp. And this is sort of a project born out of some work that I'm doing for my company, where our mission really is just like making tech skills accessible and really trying to get to reach people and help them understand, coding doesn't have to be as intimidating as I think a lot of people assume it is. At least I did, for sure. I have been a lead instructor at Actualize for the last 3 years. I hit 3 years in September, and I'm super excited about it. I will maybe never leave. I love it here so much. But we wanted to start offering more kind of like outreach and more like events like this so that we could kind of help people who are sort of on the fence about like, maybe this is something I could do, maybe this is something I'm interested in, but I'm not quite sure. So I really wanted to figure out a way that we could kind of get in touch with more people and sort of reach people and see where we're all at. Before we dive in, does anybody want to, we have quite a few people this evening, so I have a couple of ways that we can do this. I wasn't really sure how many people to expect. So I have set this up in a couple of different ways. I think we probably have too many friends to like jump around and like everyone kind of say where we're right. That would take like our entire time together. So I did set up what's called a Jamboard. Anybody familiar with Jamboards?
No.
Okay, that's totally cool. So a Jamboard is kind of, it's a Google Doc sort of setup, but anybody can access it. So I can share this with you, and everyone can, everybody can access this. So I'm going to send you this link. I'm going to copy it. Anyone with this link can edit this. I'm going to turn off my screen share real fast because I lost the ability to, yep. Lost the ability to chat, y'all. Okay. Oh, we don't have that. Great. Nuts. Okay. Wow. All right. So quick pivot. This happens sometimes. A career in tech is a career in constantly being willing to improvise. So instead of actually going in and being able to edit this together, which is totally fine, which was kind of my intention, but not a big deal. Maybe if y'all are feeling okay with this, we could potentially just kind of have a short conversation. If you'd like to share, please feel free to come off of mute and share. I just set up a series of like 4 questions just to kind of get an idea about some things about y'all. Like I'm curious, like what some of your experiences have been like up until now, how you are feeling about, the tech industry, coding in general. What brought you to an event like this? Like what's got you excited about doing something like this? I just kind of want to spend some time getting to know y'all. So I realize that with Zoom, it can be a little bit awkward with people like trying to talk in multiple, like at the same time, right? So at the bottom of your Zoom window, there is a reactions button. And if you click on it, there's a little raise hand feature. So if you're like, yeah, I definitely want to share, feel free to just drop that and we can like move through the queue one at a time. Sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. I love how many of you are like on camera. Oh, this makes me so happy. Okay. So the first question I have is, how comfortable are you with tech in general? Like what are some of our feelings about tech? Anybody want to share? It's okay, I don't bite, I promise.
4 out of 10.
Okay, 4 out of 10. Nice. Okay. Anyone else?
In what regard do you mean, like how, like what do you like in coding, or what do you mean by tech?
Just tech. Like, would you say you're like a super, like you're like, I'm just really into tech. I like keeping up with tech news and like new stuff that's coming out, like things like that.
All right, if it's a 1 to 10 scale, I'd probably say like a 6. I
Okay.
used to be more, but
Okay.
I've lost interest probably.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Earl, I saw your hand. What's up?
Well, it's constantly evolving. So what you know today is not going to help. Well, it's going to help you in 3 months, but you're still
Absolutely.
going to be learning.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Do you kind of like keeping up with that like pace of like constantly learning?
For the last 50 years.
Nice. That's awesome. I love that. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Earl. All right. If I say your name wrong, please correct me. Is it Laylee?
It does, yes.
Excellent. Hey, Laylee.
First off, let me just warn the group I have a speech impediment. But I'm very comfortable as a user of tech,
Cool.
but not a producer.
Okay. That's totally fine. Totally fine. Great place to start. Patrick, did you have a hand up?
I didn't put one up, but I'm happy to speak. I feel pretty comfortable with tech as well. It's always been something that I've like been interested in, whether it's when I was in college, my MacBook Pro got orange juice spilled in the side of it, and so I had to buy a new one. And then realizing that I had a MacBook Pro that was just sitting there dead, I watched a video on how to take it apart and clean it and put it back together. So just like kind of stuff like that. It's always just something that's like interested me, and it's like Earl said, it's something that's always evolving. So it's super nice to always be learning about something new, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Also, thank you for being a team player. Like, I didn't mean to call you out like that. I thought I saw a hand. You're like, all right,
No, it's
fine.
all
If I'm
good.
getting voluntold, that's what's happening. Cool. Excellent. Anybody else have anything they want to share about how comfortable they are? If not, that's okay. I've got plenty of questions for y'all. We got a bunch to do. Is it Chandrea?
Chandrea. Yes.
Chandrea. Thank you for correcting me.
So I know I came on a little bit late, but just to preface it all, like I feel like I'm moderately comfortable using tech. I find my son calling me an old lady when it comes to the way I engage with things nowadays. But I do have the desire to learn and learn something different. I considered being going into like a front-end web development program.
Cool.
But I don't know. So I just popped on here to see, just to listen and observe and see what it's all about.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I love that. Excellent. All right. I forget who it was, so apologies. I'm not gonna lie, I'm slightly nervous tonight. But I did have someone asked me, are we talking about like how comfortable with like tech in general? Are we talking about like coding? And I was kind of being more broad because my second question is more general. Like, do you have any experience coding so far? And if you do, what has that kind of been like for you in the past? Anybody want to call anything out? Yeah, Roxy.
Recording in progress.
Hi.
So I started out like a decade ago.
Nice.
But just with like little things like LiveJournal, a lot of people say MySpace, stuff like that. So I started Free Code Camp and Scrimba recently. And so I'm currently doing JavaScript, and now I'm a little intimidated.
Okay, cool. Love that you called out LiveJournal. MySpace is how I got my start. Like that was honestly, I was exactly in your shoes at that. Like, and I was like, played around. How hard could it be? I could probably do this, right? Totally a different animal than what I thought it was going to be, but way doable, right? Love that. V, you've got a hand up.
Hi, I'm V.
Hi, V.
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science and Master's of Science in Management Information Systems, and over 30 years experience in web development. If anyone wants to go into web development, it's a very exciting career and you really will enjoy your career. You work with great people. It's a wonderful industry.
Y'all heard that? If you got questions tonight, we're directing them to V because she has the most experience. Yeah. Awesome. V, I'm so glad you're here. That's awesome. I love that we end up with people, or I hope that we're going to continue to end up with people who are just kind of all over the place in different places of their career, different levels of experience. You know, I think that's really cool. Daniela, you've got a hand up.
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So I have about a year and a half of experience in coding. I decided to change my career about a year ago. I used to work in tourism and I used to travel the whole world. So my job was traveling around the world. Changing into coding was a decision that I wanted to do it for years. So maybe some of you were thinking this for a long time, just like me. And believe me, there is no right moment to do it until you do it. At the moment, I'm working for Cisco. I am a part of an apprenticeship program, which, okay, I wouldn't say I can call myself a fully engineer, but I'm heading there.
Okay.
At the moment, I'm working with Golang, and I've done a bootcamp previously, which helped me, but maybe this is a little tip for anyone who wants to get into this area, is that boot camps are good because they will teach you the basics, but I don't think you will be like 100% fully prepared for a job. And that's something that we all think, that after the boot camp, you'll be fully prepared. The truth is, you don't learn coding 100% until you work, until you do your own job training, because every company has their code different. But if you want a tip, just review the basics. Start with JavaScript because that's the mother of all. And then once you understand the structure, the data structure, and design patterns for coding, you'll be able to understand any programming language.
Nice. I love that. I love so many things that you just said. And I want us to remember, like, I want all of us to remember what Daniela said about, like, you're not going to know everything, right? And earlier Earl told us, you know, things are constantly evolving, right? So it's not our responsibility to just keep everything in our brains. So if you are brand new to this, or you've been doing it for 30 years, I want you to please remember, like, you are human, and there's so much more than one way to answer a problem, right? There's more than one way to kind of come up with a creative solution. So something to remember in your coding journey is that I'm not responsible for keeping everything inside of my brain, right? And I could have all kinds of different ideas of how to fix something. That's really cool. Nick, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I can actually echo exactly what Daniela was saying. So I'm actually in another coding boot camp right now. Sorry if it's not Actualize, but I hope I don't get kicked out of here for that. But
no, you're
yes,
totally good.
I had some very basic experience with programming back in college, a few courses that I took, and then I started my career in sales for several years and wanted to make a transition. So I went to a coding boot camp, and actually have about 2 weeks left now. So we're kind of in the process of applying, and it was a full-time program. So it was 14 weeks. And so we're in the process of applying to jobs now. And I would say the imposter syndrome is definitely starting to hit a little bit. You cover a lot of different topics in the boot camp, but obviously in an industry like this, it's one of the things where you'll never know everything, and there's always more to learn. And so as I'm looking for jobs and applying to jobs, you realize, like, wow, I don't know this, I don't know that. But looking back from where I was 14 weeks ago now, you know, it doesn't feel like I know a ton right now, but the gains that have been made, the improvements that have been there are really incredible. So definitely still a long way to go, but yeah, the boot camps are a great way to start. But you know, it's one of those things where it's a kind of a continuous learning process.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I love what you said about, like, stopping and looking back, right? So often the thing about imposter syndrome is, like, you start to realize all the things you don't know yet, right? And you just panic because you're like, there's so many things I don't know, right? But the fact that you've come so far already is just so important to remember and stop and reflect on periodically, right? I love that.
Yeah. And one more tip for everyone,
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think with coding, I realized that any progress is a progress, and that's something that you need to realize.
Yes.
And So the imposter syndrome is huge when you are in coding, but remember, every progress is a progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up, Daniela. And Nick, I'm not going to hold it against you that you went to a different coding bootcamp. It's okay. I tell all of my students I'm super, super biased because prior to getting into coding, I was a high school special education teacher. And I was like, oh, I should get into tech. Like, you know, I want a career change. I think I'm going to kind of pivot. And I found Actualize. And that's what actually brought me from Louisiana to Chicago. And I was a student here years ago before I started teaching. And then after being in the industry for a while, I was like, man, I really miss teaching. And so I was like looking for a way to kind of marry those skills together and just ended up back here. So I am super biased. I tell all of my students, I'm like, y'all, as far as I'm concerned, we're the best one, but that's, you know, don't take it from me. I've never gone anywhere else. Like, you know, cool. Thank y'all so much for sharing your experiences so far. I love to hear about that. The next question I have for you is, can you envision yourself in a tech career? And I want to know why, or maybe why not, right? I know that that's such a like odd thing to think about for some of us, right? If you'd asked me this like 7 years ago, I'd have been like, absolutely not. Like, I don't have whatever XYZ skills I think I'm supposed to have, or what have you. Anyone want to share? Yeah, Patrick, nice. Now he's got the hand up. What up?
Now I'm volunteering. Yeah, I could definitely see myself in a tech career. Like I said, it's something that I've always had some sort of passion for. And I'm currently bartending right now, and so not getting to utilize as much of my tech love as I would like. Sometimes I try to suggest edits for the way that our point of sale system works, but there's only so much I can go and do with that. So I have been trying to study a lot of stuff on my own, just to try to get a better knowledge, work on some projects that I find interesting, and hopefully that will allow me to at least show employers that while I don't have work experience, at least show you what I'm working on to hopefully inspire confidence for an employer.
Nice. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that. Selwyn, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. I just want to do this as a hobby, not as a career.
Cool. That's totally cool too. We love all code enthusiasts here. Earl, I have a feeling that you've been doing it for a while. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
You hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. Yeah, I started out before computers. I started out in electronics.
Nice.
And back then computers were relay, data storage was in relays. But, I moved on. I went to computer school in the Army. I learned machine language programming. In the 60s, I installed mini computers, which were revolutionary because they were replacing mainframe computers, which were basically shared computers. So when you start selling computers for $10,000, the people who owned them were actually, using them. They were, controlling processes in offices, doing accounting, insurance, and such. In any case, computers are gone. The computer revolution is over. We're now in the data revolution, going into AI. So knowing how, you don't have to know electronics, you have to know how to manipulate data, how to organize data, how to achieve the objective as to what you're trying to do, following the rules. If you're going to be using the internet, you've got to, and the various protocols. I don't know if people are, you're following what's involved in the microcomputers now. But I just bought a computer. It's got 16 gigabytes, actually 18 gigabytes of memory. 2 gigabytes are random access memory. It's got 5 radios built into it. the monitor interface for a screen, USB, and it's $90. So
Incredible.
it is incredible. I mean, it just blows my mind. I got more memory sitting on my desk than I saw in the first 10 years.
So true.
So, once again, you got to know what is your objective. What are your tools? What are your employer's tools? Do you have to know the internet? Do you have to know, various protocols? Right now I'm hung up on using my serial port through a USB port, which is a virtual port. And so, there's rules that I've got to follow. Software engineering is extremely important, which is basically, how you organize data. Learning object-oriented programming is extremely important. I work in C, C++, and Java, and they're all evolutionary. They all, I start out in machine language. That's the basic. That's how the computer works. Turns out computers are pretty stupid. They're not able to do an awful lot. So it takes the organization of that machine code into functions, and that's what C did. Then C had limitations when it came to object-oriented programming. So you went to C++. And then with pointers, there was a lot of issues with pointers, which you probably may or may not know. So, Java was the next level. And that said, everything is a pointer, everything is an object, I'm sorry. And so you're manipulating objects. So once again, it's evolving. If you're doing webs, you've got programs that do an awful lot of work for you. So it's how creative you are in applying them. So you don't really have to know an awful lot about the internet. You just have to know how to present data.
Yes, absolutely.
So good luck.
Thank you so much for sharing, Earl. I love that. Marius, I see you've got a hand up next.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm doing the full stack engineer program with Code Academy.
Cool.
I've always envisioned myself in tech, but I just never thought I was smart enough.
Ooh.
But then you also have to think like, you have to continue learning. This is not an overnight process.
That is correct. I think some of that, kind of like we've already touched on a little bit, some of that feeling of like, am I smart enough? And I love that you asked that. You're kind of like leaning into the next question that I have. So I'm going to come back to you in a second, Marius. Okay. Do I have whatever it is that I need, right? Am I good enough at whatever it is I think I'm supposed to be good enough at, right? We're definitely going to come back to that. But I think a lot of that comes back to the imposter syndrome that we kind of talked about, right? Like there's definitely sort of this feeling like, I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know what that even means all of the time, right? But you're absolutely right. It's about continual learning, and it's about being able to say, like, am I curious enough to continue? Like, am I excited enough? Is this something that I'm going to actually enjoy continuing learning, right? Because that's what it is. It's a lifelong, pretty much commitment to relearning, the new stuff that's coming out as it does. I'm sure Earl can attest to that. Yeah. Correct me if I say it wrong. Asmar?
Right. Said it right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So I do see myself in a tech career because I think for me, it started to become very specific. The reason that I started to learn coding was basically coming from an animation background. Animating, making visuals, using 3D modeling softwares to make visuals. It really interested me to learn coding, to learn how to use web as a medium for my artworks, to display. animations and visuals that I'm making. And I'm currently following a program from Antwerp, Belgium, coding program learning. But I realize now I'm starting to be really passionate about it because it starts to be very specific. I start to look for extra subjects outside of my school because like 3D JavaScript, animation libraries, and other things that got me really interested into coding because it started to become now my new passion. I kind of use about 60% of what I learn at school, but I also look up for many extra subjects because it started to become I realize now I can make a lot with it, and creativity, it's like it just feels to be clicking very much. In the beginning it was very abstract, but it started to become more tangible or like visible to see. So it's currently midnight in Antwerp, Belgium, and
Thank you for joining us.
this is actually
Oh
part of my homework for school, to be following something outside of the school.
That's
So being here
well,
is
welcome. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
William, one more, and then we're gonna move on to my last question because I want to get to some code and stuff today, y'all.
All right, I'll make it quick. I don't really envision myself in a career with tech. Right now, I make cabinets and furniture. That's my job.
That's cool.
And it's actually quite new. I just finished my apprenticeship.
Okay.
And I like that type of work. I'm very creative. I'm a creative problem solver. But I'm also like a huge fan of like YouTube maker channels.
That's awesome.
And I dabbled with code a tiny bit a few years ago. Like I tried, I failed. But right now I'm at a point in my life where, one, I'm trying to make more money, and two, I wanna learn like as many skills like as I can. And I wouldn't be opposed to a career in tech. It's just that I'm a very creative person, and to me, who is pretty ignorant on the subject, like coding for a company is just like sitting in a dark room typing for countless hours. And I think I'd, rather like drown myself in the bathtub than do that. But
Okay.
but
Yeah.
like the creative, like I'm curious to learn what how the creative side of it, what that would look like.
For sure. Absolutely. We are definitely probably going to talk about some of that stuff. Definitely, probably. That doesn't sound like super convincing. I told y'all I'm a little bit nervous. Here we go. I don't usually have this many friends at one time. Class is like capped at like 15 students. So I'm like, this is so many people, and I'm a little bit sweaty about it. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, it's definitely something that there are a lot of misconceptions out there, and there are a lot of different kinds of jobs and a lot of different places that you could end up working. I definitely thought before I got into it that it was the kind of like, I was like, okay, if I'm going to learn to code, I'm going to end up, in a cubicle by myself, like my nose to my keyboard all day, every day, and just like never talking to anybody. And that has not been my experience at all. I'm sure there are definitely places out there like that, but hasn't been my experience in any of the paths I've been on since I've started doing tech. But the last question I have for y'all, and Marius really beautifully like led into this, was talking about, am I smart enough to do this, right? And like we all kind of come in with these ideas of like, what do I have to be good at, or what are the things I need to be able to already have accomplished in order to learn how to code, maybe, right? Marius, you've still got your hand up. Do you have anything you want to add to this? I just thought you had a really great segue. So.
I mean, just basically, like we have the idea, the notion that you need a bachelor's degree in computer science, but nowadays you really don't need that.
No, absolutely. That's great. Thank you. Joshua, what skills do you think you need to be successful in coding?
So what occurred to me as I was, kind of just letting my mind roll as far as, what's helped me in my short 8 weeks of my coding journey, doing a different program with a different boot camp. But nonetheless, I think what I found is that it's not so much that you need to have like whoever said before, you know, like a strong background, like a bachelor's in computer science or anything like that. I think what I've found most useful is having strong interpersonal skills, being able to handle that imposter syndrome that comes up, being able to recognize that those ups and downs are just a part of learning, whether it's coding, engineering, medicine, or accounting, whatever, what have you. It's just the process of learning, and it's something new. So of course you're not going to know it. I think, you know, having just a general outward that enjoys problem solving helps. But I think more above all, having a strong sense that you can, if you believe in yourself, you can do it. If you can talk to yourself and get through those hard times, I think that's one of the strongest skills that will help you be successful, not only in coding, but just in anything that you might endeavor in life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so beautifully put. And you're absolutely right. Those interpersonal skills are so key to being successful in coding. Because it is a lot more social than we kind of anticipated it was going to be. You said something else that I loved. And now my brain is just.
Which part?
I know there were so many things. You said that being able to, it's all learning. You said it's all learning, right? You can learn how to code. You can learn any technical skills or any skills that any company is going to need from you, right? But you can't necessarily be taught as easily how to be a good team member, right? Or how to be naturally curious or interested in like solving the problems. That stuff just is either there or it isn't, right? That's super important. At the end of the day, it's all learning, right? You can spend time learning whatever you put your mind to, whatever you're interested in, really. I love that. Thanks for sharing, Joshua.
Absolutely.
Daniela, what's up?
Well, I think anyone who's been doing coding will agree this with me, but one of the strongest skills you need for coding is being able to read through documentation 24/7 because any question that you have, any package that you will use, any framework, it brings with tons of documentation, and pretty much you'll find all the answers there, but you got to be patient. So like Joshua was saying, interpersonal skills are very important because you got to be kind to yourself. You're going to go through a lot of documentation of reading and reading and reading. And you got to be able to do some problem solving. I mean, at the end of the day, all coders, most of us were problem solvers. And yeah, that's it from me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Daniela. Earl.
Persistence.
Yes. Oh, love that.
You're going to try something, you're going to fail, and you just learn what not to do. So you try something else and you keep at it.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Persistence and just being flexible. If this wasn't the answer, that's fine. What else can I do? What's the next?
But you learn what wasn't the answer.
Exactly. Nice. Thank you. Man, y'all are way like on top of this. I was expecting people to come in because like when I first started learning how to code, I was like, I'm not good at math and I'm not, you know, the best at spelling, or like, I don't have a CS degree, right? Y'all already know those things are not what's super important because the computers do the math for you, right? That's pretty amazing. My bachelor's degree was in theater, so super useless in terms of this, right? Like, it's definitely not the kind of career that you need to have a super solid background in something, which I think personally makes it a lot more accessible, right? You still have to learn some skills, right? But that's a much lower barrier to entry than being like, hey, you have to have this bachelor's, or you have to have this master's, you have to have. So yeah, absolutely. Cool. What do you say we dive in and start talking about some code? Tonight's demonstration is pretty simple. So a lot of you are going to be way beyond this. And of course, like we've already talked about, coding and web development is such a huge thing, right? It encompasses so many different things. Earl talked a lot about the data side of things. We're not even going to have an opportunity to really touch the surface of that tonight. But we are going to talk a little bit about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are the building blocks of every website that you've ever interacted with. HTML is a language it stands for hypertext markup language, and nobody calls it that. You don't need to remember that. I just have told hundreds of people, so it's just one of those things that's gonna be stuck in my brain forever. And it actually predates the internet, right? It was invented before the internet existed. And it was designed to format academic papers, right? There were like databases of like academic papers that academics were like, we need to like get our theses in order, right? And get them like formatted in such a way. So it was really about organizing your content. So we have sort of carried over a lot of that with the internet. It's not the only thing that we use in terms of organization, but when I think about like how a web page works, what I really think about is kind of like the human body, right? And if the HTML handles the structure, if we're talking about a web page, the HTML is sort of like the skeleton, right? It's saying like, hey, this is where the arm should generally be, right? Like that's kind of where it goes, okay? So our HTML is going to organize our structure of our content, things that are going on the page, things that are appearing. So a lot of us probably have a pretty familiar background with HTML, but if we don't, that's totally okay. HTML is usually organized in sets of tags, right? These are called elements. Real quick, I can show you, there are lots of keyboard shortcuts. Love a keyboard shortcut. We live and die by them. If you're looking at an HTML document, this is like the boilerplate getting started of what that's going to look like. All I did to get here was typed an exclamation point. This works in a lot of different code editors. I'm on a CodePen at codepen.io. If you'd like to follow along, you're more than welcome to. We're going to do something super simple tonight. But if you're not interested in following along, that's totally okay. Like I said, I am recording. That will be available later. If you'd like to go back and refer to it later, if you're like super just getting started and like, hey, I want to build some things out, right? But if we look at the boilerplate code, basically we have two main sections in an HTML document. We've got our head, which connects a bunch of things together and gives us a lot of like metadata. It tells us specifically what kind of views we're going to have. It tells us what kind of like languages we're going to use. And it says things like our title, right? So in our title of an HTML document is usually what you'll see up here, right? So it says a pen by Amanda. Somewhere in the HTML of this web page, that's what's input into our title there, right? So if I were to change that, then it would change the name of our document, right? So we've got our head, and then down here we have our body, and inside of our body is where everything that lives on the page is going to go, okay? We're not even going to get this involved tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out of there. Inside of our body, we're going to pretend like this is an HTML document, and we're just inside of the body. We're going to do something really simple. We're going to build a tiny garden. It's not going to be super elaborate, but we are going to build a little garden, and we're going to use HTML and CSS to get it set up and styled, and then we're going to use JavaScript to manipulate it or allow it to grow a little bit. But that's our plan for this evening. So getting started, the first element I'm going to put on our page is an H1 element. And we've got our two tags. We have an opening tag and a closing tag. So the opening tag of an HTML element is going to just have whatever it is. H1 stands for like heading. It's like a header. And you can go all the way from H1 to H6. And basically as the number gets bigger, the heading just gets slightly smaller. I'll show you an example of that in just a second. Our closing tag is always going to match. It's just going to have this little backslash in front of it. Back, forward, forward slash. And anything that goes in between your tags is considered your content. So here is our header. And this is going to be, welcome to our garden. Oop. Y'all, I'm extra bad at spelling when 75 of my friends are watching. Israel, what's up? Do you have a question? Anything you want to share? I see your hand up.
Quick question. So the H1 through H6, do you have to use them in sequence? Like you can't use H2 until you use H1, or
nope.
It's dependent on what size you want the letters to come out?
You can do whatever you want. My favorite answer to questions is with the power of the internet. anything is possible. But there's really no rhyme or reason to how you put them in order. I could make this an H6 if I wanted to, right? So down here is where it's showing me my output. Okay, so here's my header. It says, welcome to our garden. If I want it to be smaller, I could say like, yeah, let's give it an H4, right? And that automatically updated, which is really cool. And that made it smaller. And then after that, I could absolutely give myself an H1 and just anything I want here. You can put anything in any order, right? So you don't have to use them in order, right? From 1 to 6. However, it would look really weird if all of my headers were super tiny and then all of my text content was really large, right? So it's just a matter of what works best for you, but you can do whatever you like. Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for raising your hand and asking. Like, if anybody has questions or comments or anything they want to like bring up while we're going through this, like, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm happy to chat. This is one of my favorite things. I am going to talk a lot about my job because this feels a lot like my job to me. This is the point of like where I work, right? It's a class, it's all day long. I'm here, I'm kind of like demonstrating things, I'm showing things to people. And at any point in time, anybody can stop me and just be like, hey, Amanda, I have a question about that, or I didn't quite catch that, right? And that's one of my favorite things, is that it really does feel like we're all in the same place, even though we're, you know, all over the world, apparently, coming in from Belgium. Smart, nice. Okay, I just remembered and I got super excited. I can't believe it's midnight and you're like, let me hang out on Zoom. Cool. So we've got our header for welcome to our garden, and I'm going to put that back to an H1 because I like it bigger, right? So here I am going to add in a couple of things. I'm going to give myself some grass. Okay. We have the H1 tag, which is a header, and through H6, which just has varying sizes of headers. For regular text, like paragraphs, remember HTML was designed to give us the content of papers, right? To organize the content of papers. So we have a P tag, and that stands for paragraph. Okay. So we're going to say there's grass in our garden. There's flowers. We planted flowers, and then there's more grass. So this is what our garden looks like right now. Not quite gardeny yet, right? It's getting there, but these P tags are just us using text, right? It's saying like, this is just standard text. These elements are, in this case, not super important because I'm going to change them in a second. But if I were to be writing paragraphs about each thing, I would probably use this P tag, right? If I were just like, I just need like a block of text. Okay. But instead of using these P tags, I'm actually going to use something called a div. And this is kind of an arbitrary, it's just, the way I think of divs is that it's a box, okay? Because when you have HTML, you can put elements inside of other elements. And oftentimes we use divs as like a default. So if you're going to stack your divs and put everything inside of a div, right? So I could put all of these things inside of one div. I could say, here's a div. And then I could move all of this content, all these divs inside of this other div, right? And it's kind of like boxes that contain other boxes. You all know like those nesting dolls where you like open up a doll and it's like another smaller doll and then they just keep going. It's like 30 dolls all packed into one doll, which is kind of weird if you think about it, right? That's kind of how HTML behaves sometimes. That's how I think about divs, right? So a div basically just says like, okay, this is an element. This is how I want to kind of contain this content. And I think of it, like I said, as kind of just saying like, okay, this is its own container, right? A div can be a little more semantic. If I knew that something was going to be like this grass section, maybe I wanted to say, actually, this is my navigation, right? I could make this my nav. I could make something, all kinds of different elements, right? There are a lot out there, not a ton, but there are different things that you can use to get a little bit more specific, because divs, if it's just div the whole way through, it can get really, really messy really quickly, right? But in this case, we're not going to do a ton, so I'm just going to leave divs, and that's fine. So the div, the container, allows me to assign things to it, right? So I have this HTML, and this is just organizing text on the page. That's all it's doing, which is fine. But when I think about that human body again, right, the HTML being the bones, the CSS is sort of like the way that I can style it, right? So think of it as like your clothes or your haircut or your makeup or your nail polish or whatever, right? The ways that you express yourself. So I can use CSS to target certain things in my HTML to say, this is how I want this to look, right? So if I go to my CSS, I would write this, for example, if we wanted to make our title, welcome to our garden, if we wanted to make this blue, okay, I can write a CSS rule that targets an H1, right? This is the only H1 on my page. If I had several H1s, the rule would apply to all of them. And we'll talk about getting more specific as we go. But I can just say, all right, we've got our garden and I want my title to be blue. So I'm going to target that H1, okay? And I can open up some curly braces. And inside of this CSS H1 stack, I can assign the rules that I want to have happen, right? So I want this to be blue. We have color, blue, and then I give it a semicolon, and then this automatically updates. And look at that, now it's blue, right? We have color, or we can have background color for things, and I'll show you that in just a second. Not entirely sure why we decided color automatically applied to text. The inventors of CSS didn't really run that by me when they made it. I'm like, one's background, but the other one's not text. You know? Israel, you got a question, what's up?
Yeah, I've been working on one of the online code tutoring things. And then there's like on CSS, there's a dot. Like if you want to dot H1, what does that actually do?
Dot H1?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. I was like dot or doc with a C.
Dot.
So if I were to do a dot H1 like this, this is no longer blue because this dot is saying this is no longer just an element. A dot is looking for an element that has a class of something. Okay. We'll talk about divs, classes in just a second. I'm sorry, we'll talk about classes and IDs in just a moment. We're going to use an ID tonight. We're not going to get too deep with this, but when you have several of the same thing, so let's say I have 2 titles, right? Welcome to our garden. We are glad you are here, right? So my H1s are both blue, and that's fine. But if I want one of them to be something different, right, I could assign a class, right, or an ID, and I could say the class here is, I don't know, second, right, because this is kind of my second header, okay? And that doesn't change anything yet, but once I go here and I can say dot second, now I'm saying, okay, the H1 has a rule, right, because that's the element, but then I can get even more specific. And I can say the class of second, right? Because that dot means I'm calling a class, that will have other rules. And the other rules might override the rules that are already in place. So let's make this one purple, right? And now this is purple. Even though it is an H1, right? This deals with the rules of specificity. Saying that something has a class is more specific than just saying the element itself, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, totally. I said we weren't going to do classes and then I demoed one anyway. So, you know, maybe you can't trust me. Okay, cool. Thank you for asking. That's a really good question. So we're going to also style up our garden because right now it's not looking very gardeny. Alpha, help me out. How do I say your name? Alpha? Alpha? Hello? I see a hand up.
Alta.
Alta? Okay. Do you have a question? No? Hello? All right. I'm not sure. So we're going to keep going. Cool. All right. If you come back, you can ask. That's totally fine. Are you there?
He's cutting in and out.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'm not hearing anything and I'm not sure. Okay. I see the mute like turning on and off, but that's it. Okay. Althab, are you there? Hello? All right. I think your internet might be cutting out. If it comes back, feel free to just jump on and be like, hey, Amanda, like, I'm happy to stop. Cool.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are. Yeah, what's
Oh,
up?
Yeah, the thing is, having two H1 tags in one page is a good practice.
I'm sorry?
Having two H1 tag in a page, was that a good practice or like?
It, probably not. If I were doing something like for an actual like page that I was trying to build, I probably wouldn't have two H1s. I probably would say H1 is my main title, right? And then if I were organizing this in like an essay, or I think of like HTML, I think of like a textbook. I go, okay, the chapter title is big, right? And then we have like those subtitles, right? The ones that are slightly smaller that are like, okay, this section of text is about this, right? I don't know why in my mind, every time I envision it, it's like a science textbook and I'm like, the mitochondria, right? Like, I don't know. And then the next thing will be like the cell walls. So those might be like H2s. But again, you can do whatever you want, really, right? As long as it's what you are envisioning. I think more often than not, the question is, what are you trying to accomplish? More so than like just going for it, right? And then kind of like thinking through, okay, do I need this to be another H1 or would I rather this be like an H2, right? Does that kind of answer your question?
Oh yeah, because
Okay.
I thought, oh yeah, so there's a W3C standard, right? For when we're writing HTML code. Yeah, all right then. Because
yeah, for sure.
I read somewhere that using two H1 tag is not a good practice.
I wouldn't do it the way I just demonstrated it. No, I wouldn't publish that somewhere and just be like, here's a wall of several H1 tags. That would be silly. But for the sake of demonstrating, I just wanted you to see, because like in this case, I've got several divs, right? And we are actually going to talk about that in just a second. There, I might want to use something like a class or an ID so that I can separate things out. And I'll show it to you. Cool.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, like I said, we're going to style up some of these divs because this is not very gardeny as far as I'm concerned, right? Something that you should know about me is I'm not super artistically inclined. I will not lie to you. I am a developer, not a designer. Okay. But I'm going to do my best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these elements, each of these divs, and I'm going to make them sort of represent what I want them to be. Okay. So I'm going to give each of them a border. And we'll say border style, and I'm going to do solid. We have different options. So this kind of outlined everything. I can do solid. I think it's dashed. Yeah, there's dashed, there's dotted, right? You can do all kinds of different things, but I want a solid border for now. So we're just going to leave that like it is. And this is kind of difficult to read right now. They're kind of smushed up together, and I don't love that, right? So I'm going to give these some size. I'm going to say I want my width to be 100 pixels. PX represents pixels, right? A pixel is a unit of measurement. They're really small, right? Because obviously this tiny little box is 100 of them, right? And I'm going to give it a height. I want these, let's make them square. So this is also going to be 100 pixels. So now they're like little boxes. So we're going to kind of okay. We've got some space where I'm saying like, all right, this is where I'm going to have this go. I'm going to put them all on the same line. So we're going to use float left. This is a weird one to kind of understand. When I say like float left, it means I want everything to be kind of pushed over to the left side, right? I could also do right, a float right, and that will push everything over to the other side. Okay. But I'm going to put them back to the left.
It's ready to go here in game 4.
Typically, a div is going to take up the entire width of whatever its container is, right? So in this case, the divs don't live inside of another container, so they go the whole way across. So without this float left rule altogether, all it does, right, it takes up the entire width of the page naturally until I give it a width and a height, right? So the div itself is still taking up the whole line. Even though I'm saying like, all right, this is what I want this border and this style to be, right? A div will dominate the entire line that it's on, unless you tell it, hey, I don't want you to do that, which is what we did, right? We said float left. I said, actually, I only want that 100 pixels to be taken up, right? We can also give it a margin of 50 pixels. And a margin is me giving space like outside of the border, right? I'm giving space between each of these borders, and I'm saying I want this much space around each thing, right? Laylee, you have a question?
I do, and it might be super amateur-esque, but how do you know like the terms to assign it to? Like, for example, you're using width or height or float. Like,
okay, yeah, for sure.
You know,
CSS has a ton of different things that you can use. Honestly, I know them from familiarity of being able to like the number of times I've gone through and done things like this.
Sure.
But that comes from simply just going and Googling it, honestly. Like before I was like, okay, I have an idea of what I want this to do, and I know some of these styles, and there are definitely still tons of things that I have to go out and Google all the time, right? So kind of like Daniela was saying, like there's a lot of reading documentation, right? And so when I'm like, I want to style something a specific way, but I'm not exactly sure how to achieve that, I would just go Google it.
Right? I see. Yeah, because in my coding class, like they were teaching us how to do all this, but I was like, but how do you know what to
There
like,
is the information.
specify?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually documentation. And I apologize. I should have linked some of that for you. I'm going to send a follow-up email tomorrow, and I'll definitely get you some links for some resources.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Angelica, you've got a hand up. What's up?
Hello. I just have a quick question. Oh, you have a bubbly smile. Just wondering, like, is there any, like, do you know any links to any resources of like any like encyclopedia or any guidelines, like just to know like what are the options I have for CSS?
Yeah, for sure. There are a bunch of things out there. Something that I really love to use is called W3 Schools. And that's something that's really handy, and they have a ton of stuff, not just CSS, so that's handy. But I will definitely, like I said, I'm going to send out an email tomorrow with some links for some resources. I should have had that set up for well, you know, I didn't have a chat anyway, so that wouldn't have worked, but I will have stuff that I'll send out to y'all tomorrow. Sound good?
Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all so much for asking. If there's anything else you need from me too, don't hesitate to let me know, and I'll make sure I take some notes before we jump off tonight. Cool. Israel, what's up?
Hi there. One question: how do you determine like pixel length? You just have to like, oh, you just have to guess like, oh, let's try 50, let's try 75, or do you just know because you've done it so much?
Really and truly, I went, this is probably going to be a decent size because I've done it so much, but when I'm not sure and I'm like, I don't know, what's this going to be like? I will literally go, I don't know, what's 500 look like? And I usually go way bigger than I think I'm going to need, just to be annoying, really, right? And I'm like, okay, that's way too big. Let's maybe scale it back a little bit, right? So I'll be like, I don't know, maybe I want 300 instead of 500. 500 is a little excessive. So now those are a little bit smaller, but they still kind of, I mean, I could go like this. I don't know. What do we think? 300? We'll do 2. I like a little bigger, right?
So just trial by error, essentially.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's honestly, I think that's what a lot of coding comes down to sometimes, especially if you're like, I don't know anyone who knows, you know, offhand how big a pixel is. They're very, very small. Earl, you going to tell me you know how big a pixel is?
In the back of my mind, going back about 15 years when I did this thing.
Yeah.
When you log on, you know, you go to a website. That website knows what your screen is.
Yeah.
And from that information, you know how, you know, there's the information is passed on as to you know, what the page width is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, if you're talking to a a smartphone, it's not the same as if you're talking to somebody that's got a 22-inch monitor.
That is true. And it brings up a really good point. When we start thinking about different screen sizes, a pixel is a fixed amount of space. It is like a defined, like it's tiny, but it is a defined amount of space, right? When we start thinking about different sizes of screens, if I say this needs to be 500 pixels, right? Could you imagine this is fixed? If I said these were 500 and then I put this on your smartphone, that would be really annoying, wouldn't it? That would be super annoying. You're like, well, I can't see this whole picture. Like, this is way too big. Like, why are we doing this, right? So actually, there are other measurements that we typically use. And again, you can find that in docs. There are things like EM. There are, I'm blanking on the rest of them, of course, because now I'm on the spot. But
RAM.
thank you. Yes, there are all kinds of different measurements that you can use that actually don't have like a fixed, like this is how big it is. It's more of this is on a scale based on what you're looking at, right?
And also your pixel size or whatever you decide to use, it depends on the page layout that you're gonna be designing.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many things that go into this. And again, I'm not a designer. So it may seem like I know a ton about CSS, but I'm not gonna lie to y'all. Like I know just enough to be dangerous, right? I'm like, oh, you want me to make this cute? Okay, I'm gonna do my best, but we're gonna look at my garden in a second. Asmar, what's up?
Just for Israel's question on pixels measurement, you can also use the view height and view width.
Yeah.
And then these are always, like 30% of the screen's width or height. And for syntax, when people ask for sources, well, I think with CSS and these things, well, generally the options are limitless. Usually once you start to learn a few things, you can just combine them and realize that you've unlocked yourself, just thousands of possibilities by just knowing a couple of things and then linking a couple of sources to just reuse newer things. So remembering syntax is really not the point.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, love all the things y'all are saying. Second of all, love that you're answering each other's questions. This is fantastic. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, a lot of it is just kind of like tinkering, right? When we think about like, if I may date myself again, back in the day on the MySpace, right? We would like find themes and then we would just mess around with the source code and be like, I don't know, can I change this, right? I want it to be this color instead of that color. Like maybe I can make this happen. And that's what so much of programming is just not being afraid to like find things and then just mess with it and be like, what happens if I do this, right? And that really is how you kind of like learn so many different things. Patrick was telling us earlier, like he had a MacBook that was just like sitting. So he was like, I don't know, what if I just take it apart, right? Like that is the spirit of like going for it and just trying things out and saying like, you know, if it doesn't work out, all I've done, Earl, is figure out one way not to do it, right? And now we move on to like, maybe this will work, right? Cool. Excellent. Y'all have great questions. Cool. Let's finish styling this up. And again, I'm not a designer, so like this is going to be very, very simple. But I'm going to align our text align, because I don't like that it's like smushed up like that. And I'm just going to say center, and this is just pushing it over to the middle, right? I want it like centered in the box. That would be helpful. So I'm going to give it a line height of 100, because that's the height of the boxes, right? And that's going to push, oh, no, it's 200, isn't it? 200, there we go. I forgot we adjusted our boxes. So now it's floating right in the middle, right? So this is cool, all right? Last thing I want to do is, this is a garden, right? So I want it to look like a garden. So I'm going to give it a background color. And what's really cool about working with colors in CSS is you can literally just write green. And look at that, it goes, oh yes, here is green. This is what green looks like, right? You can use hex codes. There are also other ways that you can code in the colors. And there are like endless resources online to say like, you can use hex picker, right? You can get different codes to get like specific colors. But CSS does know several, I think light green is also an option. Yeah, so you can kind of play around and just say like, here are some colors, right? Cool. Any questions about divs or styling so far, what we've got? This is starting to look sort of like a garden, right? We've got like our green patches, right? Yeah, that's gardeny. Okay. I'm going to take away these labels because ultimately when I grow a garden, I'm not going to have the content there, right? I'm not going to be like, here's my grass and here are my flowers, right? You'll just sort of know, and we're going to represent that with colors tonight. You can have empty divs. Each div is assigned styling. So like it's still taking up space on my page, right? So we're just going to leave that there. Our middle div, this is going to be our flowers. Okay. So I've got grass and flowers in the middle. The content I'm going to use, I use a Mac. So if you do Control, Command, and Spacebar, you can pull up emojis, which is cool, right? And HTML knows what emojis are. So I'm going to give this a little water droplet because that's where I'm going to water my flowers. Okay. So I'm going to assign a class, like I said, an ID here, and we'll give it an ID of flowers. Okay. This is my flowers, this patch, right? So like we talked about before, I can give this a, for a class, we said we use a dot. For IDs, we use a £sign or a hashtag, depending on which generation you're, subscribing to. We would go here and we'd say flowers, right? And I'm saying for the ID of flowers, I want something else to happen. So we could say we want this background color. What color are our flowers, friends? Somebody throw
Red.
Red. Love it. We got red flowers. All right. So here are our red flowers. See, now it's looking like a garden. If you're not a designer, like, what's up, Angelica?
Hi, this might be a little bit off topic because I noticed you put the emoji too. What if you want to import a custom font? Because I'm pretty sure there should be like, it should understand like a set, like maybe like Arial or something. But what if there was like an external font that you would want to use?
You can absolutely do that. Depending on your machine, like what browser you're using and what your setup is, there are fonts that are already like available to you. Like you said, that it knows Arial, like it knows, Times New Roman, it knows like all the basic ones. You can absolutely import fonts. You would do that like before I was showing you the head section and then the body section of your HTML. You could import your font as a script tag in the head of your HTML. We're not going to go through that tonight, but you absolutely can, which is really helpful because back in the day, if you were like, I want this to be in this font, but you didn't import it, right? It wouldn't guarantee that people could see it. Was somebody going to say something? Yeah, Asmar.
You can also import in the CSS. You can use the @ import and @ URL from Google Fonts. You can have the, and then just assign it the same way you assign font family.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
okay. Okay, thank you.
One way to do it. Yeah, for sure. Direct all your questions from now on to Asmar. All right. So I like this, but what I want to have happen, because in a garden, typically, right, we would have it's all green, right? And then as we water it, it will bloom, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that we can water our flowers, okay? And then when we water them to a certain extent, they're going to bloom and then they will turn red. So that's what we're going to do. So the HTML is our content, right? It's our structure. It's our bones. The CSS is saying how it should look, right? It's the way we style things. It's the way we dress or the way we express ourselves. And then the JavaScript is kind of like our muscle structure, right? It says, it dictates like how we move, right? How do things react, right? Kind of like, well, maybe that's not a great example because it's like your reflexes, you know what I mean? Is that a bone thing or is that a muscle thing? We may have found the hole in my analogy. But your muscles control how your body can move, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to make it so
system.
Okay, and your nervous system. All right, see, obviously I never studied. In my theater degree, they did not cover anatomy. Apologies. Thank you for that. I'm not sure who called that out, but appreciate you. Cool. So we're going to make it so that we can water these flowers. All right. And I'm going to give us an H2 tag here. And I'm just going to say water. And I'm going to say 0 days. We have watered this 0 times, right? Never been watered. But every time I click it, we're going to say that's me watering the flowers, right? That's me watering the flowers. So when I click, the action I'm going to take is to click. That will allow me to water these flowers. So inside of this div opening tag, right, which is where I put the ID, that's an attribute to the HTML element, I'm going to give it another attribute, and it's going to be on click. All right, on click. And when I say on click, what I'm saying is when a user clicks on something, it's going to trigger something else, right? So there are all kinds of different things that you can do. There's on click, there's on hover, right? On mouse over, there's all kinds of different things. We're just going to get into on click tonight. But I want to run a JavaScript function, right? I want something to happen when I run this function. When I click on the thing, I'm going to run a function. So I'm going to pass in the name of a function, which doesn't exist yet, right? Water garden. And when we're calling a function, when we're evoking a function, we give it the name of the function and then these 2 parentheses, okay? An open parenthesis and a close parenthesis. And that's saying, run this function, please, right? So what I am going to do is I'm going to run the function. So in our JavaScript, this knows I'm looking for a JavaScript function. I'm going to go ahead and write a function. So to write a function, JavaScript is another kind of silly language that looks very weird. But when we write it, we start with saying, I'm writing a function. You have to tell it, right? Kind of like Earl said, computers are not that smart. You have to be like, hey, it a function. You going to do it? Okay, cool. It is a function, and I have named it water garden because that's what I called it over here, right? And I'm going to pass those parentheses, okay? And then I'm going to open up curly braces. So this kind of represents, like, this setup is a little bit similar to the way we see it in CSS, right? Sometimes you'll see structure that's similar to other languages. Again, nobody consulted me when they were writing any of these. So I just notice similarities and go, huh, isn't that interesting, right? Don't really have a reason why, but it's there. So we're going to water our garden. And every time we water our garden, I'm going to give myself an alert, okay? And that's just going to be a little text box that pops up and it says, you watered the garden. Water the garden, yay. At the end of a line in JavaScript, much like, again, another similarity, we see in the CSS, we're going to end a lot of these lines with semicolons. Not all of the time, but most of the time, okay? So I know on click for this div, this specific div, I'm going to trigger this water garden method. And over here, the function is going to give me an alert that says you watered the garden. So now down here, if I click on this box, I get this alert that says you watered the garden, right? So that is an example of all 3 of those pieces working together, right? And this is basically how the internet works, right? It's gone from being, it's crazy. It's gone from being these like really static pages of just HTML and things being set out, like just like really laid out and like nothing moves, nothing changes. It looks like kind of like reading an article online without any videos or any kind of like any reactivity at all, right? To being what we're used to now, right? Like web applications are so ingrained in like our everyday way of life, right? So we've watered our garden. That's cool. I like to link up things like that just so I can say, I know that this function works, right? I know it's doing something. That's great. The next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to get rid of this line. This is called a comment. You can comment out lines in just about any language. They look a little bit different. This is a JavaScript comment. Over here, I can also comment out. This is how HTML does it, right? And it just gets rid of one of my boxes, but I want it back because I like that. I'm on a Mac. You can use the command and then the question mark to comment something out really easily. You don't have to highlight the whole line. You can just be next to it. Again, love a keyboard shortcut. We live for them, so I'm happy to share them. Cool. So I actually want this to manipulate this count here, right? I want to know how much water did I actually give it? How many days have I been watering, right? So like I said before, we can put an element inside of other elements, okay? So I've got a span. No, not gonna let me do it. All right, span. And we'll wrap our number in our span, and I'm going to boop, boop, that here. And the reason I'm going to do this is because this span allows me to assign an ID. This is another kind of arbitrary, it's there, but it's like a quiet element, right? It's not something that's going to do something to this. Like nothing looks different here unless I ask it to, right? So this is how I can inline just say like, don't push this to a separate line. Don't do anything weird with it, but I can assign here another ID so that I can target that, right? So I'm going to give this an ID because I want this to be the piece that's responsive. I want this piece to be dynamic, right? Rather than being static and always staying 0. Because when I click on this, I want this to count up, right? So I'm going to give this the ID of water. That's how I'm going to target this, okay? And then we're going to update our function so that it manipulates this this water ID, okay? So just outside of this function, I'm gonna set up a variable. We need to define variables by saying var, and we're gonna call it water because that makes the most sense. We'll talk about in a minute what else we can call it, how else we can do this, how things link up, because I'm gonna write water in a couple different places and it's gonna look strange, right? So I have water here, right? And I have a variable of water here. Those are two separate things right now, okay? This is the ID of that span. And so what I'm saying is inside of this function, what's actually going to happen is I'm going to increase the water, which we can do by saying water plus plus. That does not look intuitive at all, but basically what I'm saying is add 1 to this variable. So every time I click over here, right, on water garden, this div, this is going to trigger and the count of water is going to go up by 1. I haven't connected this yet, so we can't see it happening, but that's what I'm anticipating happening, okay? So we're going to write some JavaScript, and this is gonna look a little bit strange, but we're gonna start with document, dot, and we're gonna, document refers to the page, right? If you've ever heard of the DOM, it's the document object model. It's just what you can see on your screen, okay? So that's what's being rendered in our browser. So I'm saying inside of the document, I want to do something, okay? And what we are going to do is get elements, right? I am grabbing an element by the ID, okay? By the ID. And then I'm going to tell it which element I want, right? And I gave it the ID of water right here, right? So I'm going to grab the element that has the ID of water, okay? And this is part of our inner HTML, all right? And I'm going to set that equal, pardon me, to our water, all right? Does that kind of make sense? A little bit? No, it looks strange, but like kind of talking through it. Let's check it out. So this should be equal to this when I click the button, okay? So let's give it a try.
Wait.
Excuse me, sorry about that. Do we all see that counter though?
Yeah.
Excellent. So now we've got this connected. This is very simple. All right. I know we are getting close to that 7:30 time and I don't want to keep us too terribly late, but I do want to show you one more thing. And we said after we water our garden, it should bloom, right? So what I'd like to have happen is inside of this function, I also want to, I want to set a conditional statement. So what that means is I'm saying if a specific condition gets met, right? Something should happen. So that's going to look like this. We'll say if, and we'll say if water 1, 2, 3 equals 5. We'll say we'll water it 5 times, right? Then our flowers should bloom. So we'll open up another curly brace and we'll say alert. So the alert is a nice little sanity check for me, right? I know if I make it to 5, the alert pops up. Now what I want to have happen is I actually want to change the styling of that specific ID so that it changes colors, right? So I'm commenting out my alert just like I did before. And I'm going to use a lot of this same logic, right? And I'm going to say document, which means that I'm grabbing something off of my page. I'm going to get element by ID. And the ID I'm looking for now is flowers, right? That's what I'm using. Flowers. And then I can say dot style. And this is me telling JavaScript that I want to change the style of that ID. All right. And this looks a little strange. Again, no one ran this by me. I don't know why we switched to square brackets instead of, you know, parentheses or curly braces, but there it is. We're going to use square brackets with our style, our style method. And I'm going to change our background color to red, right? Our background color will equal red. And then we'll have red flowers. Cool. So if we go back over here and we click, 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 one more, boom, it's red. Our flowers have bloomed. Kind of looks like a garden now, doesn't it? Now that you've been looking at it for a little while, you're like, all right, cool.
Awesome.
But this is a really, really basic demonstration of how you can use HTML and CSS and JavaScript to make your web pages more reactive, right? And make it so that things change as a user is experiencing things on your pages, right? Anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Yash Paul, did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Excellent.
So what is the difference between let and where?
I'm sorry, one more time. What is the difference between what?
Let.
Let and let?
L-E-T.
Yeah.
Let and where?
There. Let and var.
Let and var?
Yeah. Var.
Sorry, I was having a hard time hearing you. JavaScript was written the very first time in 11 days, which is cool, right? That's impressive. But understandably so, it was a little bit wonky, right? And it took a really long time for them to make a bunch of changes to it. And so as the language has grown, new things have been added on top of it. And so there are some nuances to the way that you would use let or var. There's also const, but they didn't want to make it so they said we're taking one away because that would break so many things that are already in production, right? So when you think about making changes or writing things on top of languages, you have to take into account how many programs out there are already using things in a specific way, right? We don't want to make too many breaking changes. So we really want to take the time to say, all right, this used to be the way it worked, but this is how this is going to work, right? Does that kind of make sense? If I remember correctly,
Right.
var is the old version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. So it's not, there are differences, and it has to do with things like scope and whether or not you're planning on things changing. We're not getting super deep into that tonight, but that is something as you get deeper into using JavaScript to be aware of. Absolutely. An excellent question. But for our purposes tonight, there really isn't much of a difference. Cool. Okay. All right. Mario, what's up? Hello? Hi.
So all these elements, I was wondering where we could put them all together, like the blank canvas.
where could we do that? You're using CodePen.io right now?
Yes, that's correct. I'm using codepen.io. This is just something that's available on a browser. There are also other ones called Replit. These are all like text editors. There are also ones that you will see commonly used that are desktop applications. A really big one right now is VS Code. Sublime Text was one that was really big for a while. I think GitHub is trying to put out their own, like, there are all kinds of options. This is just something that's really accessible and easy. And that way you're like, if I want to try something out, I'm not trying to like download a bunch of stuff, you know, for something that I'm not even sure that I'm super into just yet, right? Yeah, good question. Angelica, what's up?
Hi. I was wondering, like, when you download, like for example, like when you're creating it from scratch, is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript like each separate documents, or are they all in a combined like text document?
Ooh, it depends. It depends. You can absolutely build them separately like this. And originally this is how it was done, right? If you just have a little bit of styling, you can absolutely put some things to your HTML, like CSS things, like really small inline styling. And being able to use HTML and JavaScript together has always been a huge draw. So that's why I see a lot of things coming out, like React allows us to do that. It allows us to write HTML inside of our JavaScript, which is amazing, and was not a thing that was there for a long, long time. But those use really interesting like libraries and compilers to be able to like reformat what we're seeing to the way that the web will actually read it. So we're like, okay, we get to do it like this, which is what we want, right? But then at the end of the day, your browser still reads it like 3 separate files, right? Like kind of like this. So it's like, okay, we have to kind of like connect everything back. So yes, it exists. Yes, you can. There are all kinds of different things out there. Once we start getting into libraries and frameworks like React, Vue.js is another one. Those are, if I were building this garden app, those would be way overkill for something like this, right? But it's absolutely out there.
Okay, that's helpful information. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Marius, what's up?
Hi, I got a couple questions.
Yes.
First question is, how do you become a digital nomad programmer?
There are a lot of different things that go into that. I think it really depends on what level of like nomad you're looking for. If you're trying to get a job and then, you know, move out of country, that could be something that requires a lot more planning. There's a lot more legalities involved in it. You know, obviously you would need a visa for wherever it is you're going. If you are like, I want to get a job that lets me work from wherever, right? I have a home address, right? So for example, I live in Chicago, but I have been known, right? Like my goal in life, basically at this point, I'm in my 30s and I'm like, I would love to be a snowbird. I realize it's kind of early for that, but that's what I'm trying to do, right? I've been known to just go back to Louisiana for like a month at a time and just chill because all my work is remote. So like, this is where I live. I have this address, right? This is my residency. So it's not that difficult if you're working remotely. But some offices have gone to more of a hybrid thing. So it really just kind of depends on what your employer dictates and how far you're trying to go, right? My classes every day are at the same time. So like I can go somewhere, but I could be like, you know, hey, it's midnight, but I've got to be in class, right? So you have to be like, you have to think about stuff like that, but it's not terribly hard to enjoy more travel if that's what you mean by more of a digital nomad life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second question.
What's up?
If I'm trying to build my portfolio, would I use CodePen or Visual Studio Code?
I would recommend using Visual Studio Code because that way you can save your projects onto your computer. I think you can like download things from CodePen, And you can certainly save pens. It's a perfectly fine place to start. But if you're like, I know I want to do some coding, I definitely think it's worth the time to get a little more comfortable with using tools like VS Code, especially if you're thinking like you're going to want to go down the path of finding a job, right? That's probably more in line with the stuff that they're using. I don't think there are many companies out there that host their code on, like CodePens or REPLs and stuff. But it has to do with like, what's the scope of the project, right? For something like this, CodePen is fine, right? Not using any frameworks, totally fine. If I were building out like an application that I was like, oh, I want to push this to production and I want people to see it and use it, this is maybe not the place I would do that.
Right. And then how many projects do you recommend that we have in our portfolio before we start looking for jobs?
That's a really good question. I think it depends, as so many things do. Sometimes you're thinking about like, okay, what is my portfolio look like, right? Sometimes it's about, can you demonstrate your skills? Each interview is going to be different. So I definitely think like having some things. Are you familiar with GitHub?
Yes.
Okay. So GitHub has this like dashboard where they're like, here are these green boxes, right? And depending on how many green boxes you have, it says like, how active are you with the coding, right? I have heard from people who have interviewed me, really what they're looking at is like, are you consistently working on something, right? I don't know how many of them are actually like opening up my projects and going, yes, you have completed a project, right? But it varies from place to place, depending on where you're interviewing. I would just say like getting into a really solid habit of feeling like you're coding pretty consistently. Like, if you're working on it several days a week for, a couple months, I think that's pretty okay to get started with interviewing, like that's more often than not, they're going to ask you to demonstrate skills rather than just go look at what you have already. So, but I don't know. Does anybody else have kind of a different take on that, or maybe more insight? I love that.
I'm now in the process of applying for a job, so I've made a portfolio for myself.
Beautiful.
And I was hesitating to send my application portfolio because I always had the thought that, oh, it's getting better every week, it's changing every week, it's evolving. So I was waiting and waiting, and then I thought I'll just send it, and then I'll just put also some stuff that are in the make, like that are will be available soon, projects, other things. And I think it has become a routine for me in the past year. I've been just working on it all the time, just integrating. One thing that is really interesting is that once you have a framework or something, or you just put your setup, how you're comfortable with, you can establish a routine on how to work with it and just make little tasks on achieving things alone. So just for me, sometimes doing little code, 2 lines of code a day, and pushing it to GitHub. And I realized some days I worked for like 12 hours, other days for 1 hour. So just, but
taking breaks. 12 hours is a long time to be sitting.
Yeah, I was very excited. I could see the difference, the evolution. So I started to be really passionate about it.
Sure. Yeah, I have those days too. Just remember to, get up, walk around a little bit, have a snack. That's important too.
I can chime in for the interview process.
Yeah, please, Phil.
Good. Because see, my job is to hire people coding, and boom. What a lot of companies do is they would give you a coding challenge. So think of it as a pre-interview assessment. And your job, just like Patrick said earlier, for problem solving, is you have to solve a problem using the code, the basic code. They want to see how you code, just like Amanda showed us. They want to see what you're coding, how you're doing it, what's your logic, how are you going back and fixing errors, and then you have to turn it in. These are timed. So it's important that before you start taking these interviews and those pre-coding assessments, or they call it code challenges, code tests, code signals, all types of things like that. You want to know that you can do this stuff backwards and forwards in like a good amount of time or a preset amount of time. Like it may ask you to count 1 to 10 or schedule something on the calendar like Amanda did. You have to be able to do that, but a lot faster than she did it. Like if they say do it in 30 minutes, you have to do it in 30 minutes and be able to do it. So that's how you know you're ready to interview, when you can start solving problems in coding quickly.
Y'all heard Phil tell me I'm too slow to get a job where he works? Y'all heard it.
Damn.
Yep.
That's
you were
rude.
you were teaching us.
No,
That's
I know. I'm
cold-blooded.
I'm teasing him. He's like, you gotta be faster than me. He's too slow.
Yeah, that's
I would
definitely
never
rude.
hire her. No, you're good.
Excuse me for being rude, but it
No.
is being able to do stuff
No.
quickly.
I meant
Absolutely.
that as a slang, not as a.
Oh no, you weren't rude. I was.
You got my back, Marvin. You got my back.
And
That's
Good that
right.
she
High
likes where she
five.
works.
Boom.
She's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm really not. I don't want a new job, Phil. I told you that. Angelica, what's up?
I'm sorry, I'll be asking a lot of questions. This question
No, I love it. That's what I'm here for.
Thank you. This question's actually for Phil. It's like you can send any like sample coding like challenges too, because like especially for the people like looking for a job, like it'd be really helpful.
With the noise in the background, do you see these questions for me?
Yes.
Yes, this is a question for you. Sorry.
All these coding challenges, you can look at, you can Google search code challenge or code test, and they're readily available. You can sign up for some different codings for JavaScript or React or Angular on something called Code Signal. So go to codesignal.com. It's a free website. You can sign up for any type of code, take some challenges, ask some multiple choice questions.
Thank you so much to both.
Excellent. Wonderful. I do want to be cognizant of the time. I know it is over now. It's over the time we said we were going to spend here. And I want to take a moment to I really wanted to have an opportunity for y'all to network because I think it's really great for you to have the opportunity to talk to each other. And I did not realize that I didn't have a chat set up here, so I don't have a way for y'all to connect with each other that way. So what I will do is I will show you my LinkedIn. I know, Phil, what am I doing? Right? It's our first event, y'all. I'm sorry.
I was looking for the chat like the first 10 minutes.
I know. I like went to go, I was like, we're gonna do a thing in the chat. And I was like, just kidding. We're not gonna do a thing in the chat. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you my LinkedIn. And then if y'all wanna find me, I'll make a post just thanking y'all for coming out. And if you wanna like find each other in there, that would be kind of like a good way for that to work. Does that make sense? Is that cool? I don't know. Okay, cool. Phil says yes. So obviously I know he wouldn't lie to me. He would never. He tells me I'm too slow. He's very honest. All right, cool. But this is me. My URL is my full name, Amanda Lynn with an E at the end, Hale. That's me. I work at Actualize. And while we're doing this and kind of wrapping up a couple of things, like I mentioned at the beginning, Actualize really is a lot of our focus is tech accessibility and really just kind of like making people aware that it's not as scary, I think, as some of us anticipate that it might be. And we want to get as many people coding as want to be coding, right? Because if you want to do it, you can do it. Our philosophy is that anyone can learn to code, anyone. If you're interested in checking out more information, our website is actually anyonecanlearntocode.com. That's our website. I will have that in the email for you tomorrow. And I also wanted to say thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate y'all being here. If you're interested in potentially finding a coding bootcamp because you're not already enrolled in one, no hate to y'all. I'm sure you have lovely programs. We are offering 20% off of tuition if you're interested in taking a coding bootcamp with us, a cohort. Come hang out. I'm pretty fun, I think. Like, who wouldn't want to spend 12 weeks with me all day, every day, right?
You're actually pretty gas.
Thank you. This is what it's like all day, every day. So if you're interested, like, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, we are offering 20% off of tuition if you mention code CoOp, our group. to our admissions team. If you've got questions or you're on the fence or you're not sure, like send me a message on LinkedIn, hit me up. Like I would be more than happy to connect and talk to you about things. Yeah. Jasmine, you got a question? What's up?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I just wanted to say I was really nervous. That's why I was so quiet the whole time, but I had so much fun and I really, really loved this. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
everyone. I've been taking notes and I made the Guardian. I feel like a web developer or a software engineer.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you, Jasmine.
Of
And hey,
course,
I
thank
was
you.
nervous too. Like it's okay. I'm in there
Okay,
with
thanks.
all right.
Yeah, I'm very antisocial, so I'm trying to get better. So I need to work on that, like communication and stuff. But I had such a great time. This made my whole day.
Great. I'm so glad you came.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything else, Angelica? The hearts love it. Yes.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for
Thank
coming.
you very much.
Yeah, definitely want to connect
Amazing.
on
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
find me. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you so
evening.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, you got a question for me?
I have one last question. In the future, are you gonna teach us React.js?
One more time.
In the future, are you gonna teach us React.js?
React.
JS. Yeah.
Yeah, React.js. So we could probably dive into something like that in the future. It is something that we cover in the program I teach. But that's a little bit big for a 90-minute like class, but I'm sure we could get started with it for sure. Yeah, if anybody else has any suggestions about stuff they'd like to see for upcoming events, we've got a lot of stuff on the calendar already, but we're going to continue to do things. So like, let me know. I'm more than happy. Like I said, I'm going to email y'all tomorrow with a follow-up. Feel free to reply. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn, whatever, you know. I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great night, y'all.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Have a good
Yeah,
night.
absolutely. Have a great night. Asmar, get some sleep.